And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
And if we're talking tight ends and we're going into round 2, maybe round 3, give me Ian Thomas, please. Let's just do the damn thing.
Just based on giving his overall ability. Again, I like his arm. I think he can make every throw.
The pick at number 12 is in.
Welcome to Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. I am Russell Brown. Joining me on a Tuesday night, back on the same time, same place, CP Christian Page. My brother, how we doing?
Man, we're almost there. It's almost that time.
Yeah, it really is, man. And it's like 2 more days pretty much, and it's Christmas, and it's going to be great. And I've got my big board out, which you guys can check over at cover1.net. Tons of content coming this week just in general. CP as well going to be dropping a big board here momentarily, probably within the next day or so. And, yeah, it's going to be good. I think I'm going to have a final mock draft. I hope you attempt a mock draft so we can kind of compare and contrast. And, of course, if you guys have been listening to the podcast, you already know that last night I had Luke Inman on with me talking Minnesota Vikings, tons of offensive linemen. Also, speaking of offensive linemen, had Dalton Reisner on. And CP and I are going to just talk some NFL draft stuff today. I have Joe Goodbury coming on with me in a short time, probably about 30 minutes or so. And then we're going to try to record tomorrow. I got Michael Kiss joining me tomorrow. It's going to be a very, iconic, I guess, couple days. It's going to be a great.
Yeah, you can definitely tell it's draft week with all the eventful stardom of the NFL draft.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's jump into our stuff. And really it's, just basic stuff. Is Kyler Murray going first? Is it, any specific trades that we're thinking? Is there other quarterbacks that we're talking about? And then, of course, just like some general draft notes, news and notes like Rashawn Gary. And I guess I'll start there. Rashawn Gary being discussed today from Ian Rappaport. Funny, he listed him as a defensive tackle, which I view him more of an edge rusher just simply because of where he weighed in at the combine. But I do like him as an interior pass rusher on third down as a 3 technique. But Rashawn Gary being rumored with a torn labrum, potentially with his shoulder, and there's a good chance that he's going to need surgery. So what does this do for his stock overall? Is he going to move down draft boards? Is he going to stay the same? I don't think anybody's going to trade up and take him or anything. So really what's going to happen with Rashawn Gary?
Yeah, it's tough because he's been a guy on, I guess, both of our lists that we understood some of the hype, but didn't necessarily buy all the way into it. Just based on where he was valued. Coming into the 2018 college football season, he was a top 5, top 10 pick. We weren't ready to jump all in there. And then as the season went on, then his draft buzz kind of deteriorated a little bit. And then now we have this news of the labrum, expecting to have surgery. So you have to look at, potentially of him falling out of the first round. And I know that may sound a little nuts, but with the depth of this defensive line class and Gary not necessarily being a can't-miss prospect, I think there's definitely a guy that maybe slightly a notch below that you could take with better value than risking a, top 25, top 32 pick on a guy that's going to have to maybe sit for an extended amount of time in year one. And who knows how that will affect his longevity, at least on his first contract. So I think you're definitely, if you're in the front office, in my opinion, you're not looking at him as a first-round player anymore, at least a pick. Maybe as one of the top day 2 guys, but I think this is definitely going to be something that may give some front office people some headaches, but maybe for us, we kind of don't really bat an eye at it because we kind of knew that he wasn't necessarily a top 20 caliber player. But unfortunately, this kind of solidifies that. But I definitely think definitely think he falls out of the first round, but I think it's more likely now than it ever has been.
Yeah, I mean, it could very well happen where he goes out of that first round. I think probably somewhere in that 20 range makes a lot of sense. I mean, now Seattle has 2 first-round picks, and that's another news and note that we got to get into is, they traded away Frank Clark, creating a need off the edge for them. They get an additional first-round pick, so now they're picking 21st overall and 29th overall. and they gained an extra second-round pick, and I believe they're swapping mid-round picks somewhere down the line. But I think Kansas City's giving up a ton. But as far as the Rashawn Gary thing, I think there's a need certainly in the 20s where Oakland at 24 or 27, now Seattle at 21, 29. You throw an Indy into the mix, and maybe even Green Bay at 30, depending on what they do at 12. I think there's still a need there where he could potentially go. And if I remember correctly, Shaq Lawson, when he came out from Clemson, there was concern.
Very similar. Mm-hmm.
Yes, very similar. And he went 19th to Buffalo. Obviously, Bills fans, they know very much about Shaq and how they feel about him. But I think this is kind of a similar situation where you have a guy with a ton of talent. And me personally, I'm glad I wrote about Chase Winovich back in November because it's proving myself a little bit right, and I kind of know what I'm talking about. I've been and we've all been on it like that, Rashawn's just overrated. He's not what he's supposed to be. Granted, the injury hurts. He'd probably be a top 15, top 20 guy without this injury. I think it definitely moves him down probably 5 to 10 draft spots now. The production's not there. Now the injury. So, yes, his draft value is going to be really interesting, and he could fall out of the second round. No doubt about it. He'd be a really good value in round 2 compared to round 1, and I'd be comfortable with the team taking him at 33 to 37 or something. So we will see what happens on Thursday with him. And then, of course, with the Seattle Seahawks now making this trade away of Frank Clark, and I want to dissect that real fast to what you think this means for Kansas City. I think this is a very bold move. I understand it's win now for the Kansas City Chiefs with a rookie contract of Patrick Mahomes. But at the same time, you just signed Frank Clark to, I believe, what was it, a 5-year, $105 million contract. Well, in 3 years, you have Patrick Mahomes up. Next year, you have Chris Jones. You have Tyreek Hill coming up. You're going to have to tie in all this money in those pretty much 4 players, and then you're not going to have anything else to do, like give money to anything else. So I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on what's Seattle going to do with pick 29 now and 21.
It's kind of ironic that Frank Clark's moving on from Seattle to Kansas City when Seattle was in the situation a few years back with, the safety duo, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, Russell Wilson, Marshawn Lynch, Bobby Wagner. The list goes on and on and on. So it's funny how it's like, okay, now you can deal with all the contract disputes in Kansas City with Frank Clark. And
right.
Kansas City, if Kansas City wanted to, they wanted to keep a pass rusher or have a pass rusher before even going into the draft, whether that was holding on to that franchise tag with D Ford. Obviously that didn't happen. He's now at San Francisco getting a ton of money. Or is it trading for somebody? That's proven with Frank Clark. Now, is he proven of that kind of money he's getting? I don't know. That's not that. I don't think so because it's a lot based on the equity that Kansas City gave up for the draft and next year's draft with the second round picks. But it's tough. It's tough to evaluate Kansas City's situation here. But if they feel comfortable with their depth chart, especially across that defensive line, which was very solid a year ago, especially with Chris Jones emerging to that all-pro player. Yeah. I think it's an okay move, but I think for the longevity standpoint of that organization, they're definitely going to have to figure out something when it comes down to finances. Now, looking at Seattle's side of all things, good for them. I mean, they get a first-round pick out of a guy that was not a first-round pick, that had some character issues, but they what was he, a fourth or second-round pick back in 2015. So they got some capital there in the first round. I think you look at them, there's a lot of talk right now on the back end of that first round of what safety is going to sneak up, whether it's Juan Thornhill from Virginia, Darnell Savage, who we talked with Jordan Reed last week, a player that he really likes, the safety out of Maryland, or maybe a Jonathan Abram that's more of a box safety that'll hit you in the mouth, not necessarily that rangy guy that you're looking for. So I think if Seattle wants to look at that pass rusher at 21, and then they can look at possibly one of those safeties at 29 if they really validate that as a priority need, which I definitely think they should consider.
Well, I like this thought, and I like that you brought this up of potentially Jonathan Abrams. So we know about Montez Sweat. We know about the heart condition. Now, I don't think he's going to fall beyond 17. If New York keeps 17, there's no way they pass on him at 17. I can see them going Daniel Jones at 6, sure. But at 17, Montez Sweat should be the pick for the New York Giants just simply because of need, value, everything else. But what if somehow in some crazy world Montez Sweat is available at 21 for Seattle. They go edge rusher there, and then at 29, Jonathan Abram. Wouldn't that be just one hell of a haul? Like two guys, former teammates in college, now teammates in the NFL. I think that would be setting the tone for your defense. It would almost be like a new Legion of Boom for Seattle, I would think.
It really would be. I think if you polled a lot of general managers right now and said, if you could give me just the trio of Mississippi State players, Jeffrey Simmons, Montez Sweat, and Jonathan Abram, and those are the only 3 picks and you have in the draft, I bet you there'd be like 25% of them be like, yeah, we'll take that. We'll take those 3 picks and just those guys. And it's crazy. Just that's how dominant that Mississippi State defense was. I mean, people don't talk about it, but they ranked higher than Alabama in the SEC in total defense and scoring defense as well. So those 3 guys are definitely high praise, but that would make a lot of sense. Get Montez Sweat up front for Seattle, a guy that probably kind of like that junkyard dog mentality, like a Frank Clark that you just shipped off to Kansas City, and then get that big hitting box safety, that Cam Chancellor type that you once had, and create a new kind of stronghold of a defense in Seattle. I think that'd make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that's in a perfect world, of course, at 21. I think Montez Sweat's a top 10 player. I know the heart condition. I think everything's checking out just fine for him from everything I've researched. So, again, I think it's team's going to over-evaluate, overthink this, just like they did with Mo Hurst last year, who was a top 10 talent. And it's just about timing. It's bad timing with everything. If we would have known about this 10 months ago, it'd be a totally different story. You would have seen he played the entire year at this level, played well at the Senior Bowl and everything else. So it's unfortunate. I don't want to see him slide down draft boards, but I think he could. And I'm kind of okay with him sliding down boards simply because if the Detroit Lions do decide to trade back, they could very well be putting themselves in position to still end up with extra picks and Montez Sweat. So that's what I'm thinking in a perfect world. And for Seattle, in a perfect world, it could be Cleveland Farrell at 21. Brian Burns could potentially be there. So there's going to be certainly names for them to take a look at. But I want to talk about teams that are potentially moving up. And Josh Norris tweeted this out yesterday, maybe today, I believe it was yesterday, talking about 2 specific teams that are in the market for an offensive lineman. And that was Carolina at 16 and Houston at 23. I think both teams would be smart to get in front of a team like Green Bay who need offensive line help, and they've done a ton of research on offensive linemen. You also have Miami at 13. They don't have a right tackle. Washington, who really knows how they're valuing their board. Cincinnati at 11, they could look at an offensive lineman. Denver, I don't think so. But then you have Buffalo and Detroit at 8 and 9, who very well could go Jonah Williams and Andre Dillard like back-to-back. So I think it's smart for Carolina and Houston to move up and try to get in position. Maybe Detroit's the team that moves from 8 to 16, and they take Montez Sweat, and then Jonah Williams is there for Carolina, or Cody Ford or Andre Dillard or whoever they would want to take. What's your thought on those 2 teams potentially moving up? And do you think one of them is going to move up and one's going to stay put?
2 of the biggest gripes you always hear, and they're justified, for Cam Newton, Deshaun Watson, is because where is the help? The guys, yes, they are great scramblers. They have all the mobility in the world, very similar playing styles. Obviously, Newton a little more physical as a runner goes, but that's why he's kind of injured all the time. But those are 2 of the biggest gripes. Houston gave up the most sacks a year ago to a second-year quarterback in Deshaun Watson. And then Cam Newton was banged up all year with a shoulder injury, and they eventually sat him for the last 2 games. So it makes a ton of sense for these 2 teams, or at least one of them, to move up in the top 10 and jump ahead of some of those other tackle-needy teams, whether it is for a Jonah Williams, a Jawan Taylor, somebody, Andre Dillard, or somebody else that they think is viable of that tackle position. Just speaking on Carolina, Darrell Williams was on IR last year. They only signed him for a 1-year deal, so they're obviously not committed to him long-term. Texans, there's been some shakeup there, not the guys you want to solidify those bookend tackles. So I definitely 100% agree that with the rosters that they've shapen up in the past few years, I think both teams have drafted well enough where they can risk some picks and moving up to solidify those bookend tackles because they desperately need it. These are 2 teams that can definitely threaten the playoff picture, and they pretty much are a couple of tackles, maybe a couple of playmakers away. I know you can say that about a handful of teams, but 2 teams that have been in the playoffs before, and if they have healthy quarterback play and then healthy offensive line play, I think they're really geared up to have a nice 2019 season. they have to figure out the tackle and the offensive line as a whole.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, if Jonah Williams is off the board at 7, let's just say he goes to pick before Detroit, I do believe Detroit's going to move back in the draft. I really do. I think that's the guy that they want. And I think I'm going to explain it more with Greg Thompson tomorrow on the Cover One Buffalo podcast, and we'll do and Aaron Quinn of course as well, and or maybe on Thursday. I don't even know what day it is anymore, but whatever. We'll be talking about it. And I'll go in a little bit more detail, but I do think Detroit's highly interested in Jonah Williams, and that's what it seems like from everybody that's really well connected with like Pride at Detroit, Lions Wire, people that are down at Allen Park getting the interviews with the players and the coaching staff right now. And it seems as if Jonah Williams is the guy. So if he goes at 7, it wouldn't surprise me if Carolina moved up from 16 to 8 and took Andre Dillard before Buffalo, simply because I think Andre Dillard is a perfect fit for Carolina. I think he's a perfect left tackle for them, good pass protector, will get better at the run game. And if there's any offense for you to get better in the run game, and if there's I think a run game that helps with any flaws that you have, I think it's Carolina, because you have Cam Newton, you have Christian McCaffrey, and their ability to run, high percentage RPOs, read options and things like that. But enough of the trades, enough of really players sliding, because I think we could sit here all day and pinpoint specific players. I want to pinpoint really kind of a top 5 prediction from both of us, how Thursday is going to go and what we think is going to happen. So obviously picking first is Arizona. What do you think they do? And really give me your top 5 picks for the 5 teams that are picking in the top 5.
I mean, I have every belief in the world right now, with unless something comes up when we end this podcast. But it sounds like Kyler Murray is going to be the pick at Arizona. There's a lot of people out there that have said on broadcast, on radio, on print, that said they talked to sources close with the organization that believe that it is going to be Kyler Murray. So with that said, I think the first overall pick will be Kyler Murray. Now, you can go back and listen to pretty much every podcast since Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray had the relationship. Whether that's a good idea or not, because you're missing your chance on 2 generational talents in Quinnen Williams and Nick Bosa, then, we don't necessarily agree on that. But that's a whole nother conversation. So I think the first pick of the 2019 NFL Draft on Thursday night will be Kyler Murray, the quarterback of Oklahoma. San Francisco, I think you look straight to next best player available, looking to address that defensive line. Personally, I think Quinnen Williams is the best player in this draft, but I think Nick Bosa will be the pick. Makes a lot of sense. John Lynch has definitely tried to solidify that defense as a whole, and why not stack it up with one of the best pure pass rushers and really just pure overall players in this draft and probably of the past few drafts. Going with the New York Jets, I like Ed Oliver a lot here, but I think it's going to be too rich to pass up a guy like Quinnen Williams. I think he was one of my favorite pairings with Greg Williams. Greg Williams likes to run the versatility, switching from 3-4s and 4-3s and certain bear and nose guard schemes throughout the game, not necessarily throughout a couple seasons, but throughout the entirety of a game. So I definitely think with the versatility, Ed Oliver and Quinnen Williams could both definitely fit in there, but I think Quinnen Williams being the best player on the board be the pick at 3. And then let's go 4. Let's go Ed Oliver here. I think all the smoke and mirrors about where he's going to play and everything like that. Oakland has 3 picks in the first round. Why not get one of the best players in this draft? I think all the scrutiny is definitely overwhelming and is definitely overblown. But I think the guy, just put him on the football field and he's going to ball. And I think Tampa Bay, this is one of my surest picks in the entirety of the draft, even though Bruce Arians came out and says he likes 5 to 6 players in this draft that could be elite prospects. Well, 4 of them are going to be gone at this point. And if Devin White's one of his 6 that he likes, I think that's going to be Tampa Bay's pick at 5, because it definitely solidifies a need for them and possibly one of their best players left on the board.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with this mock draft that you just gave us. I mean, I think Kyler Murray is going to be certainly the pick at 1. I've gone on pretty much every radio spot that I've done, and I'll tell you, I'm exhausted with the question. So I hate hitting you with the question. But literally every radio show today, I was on, ESPN 106.7, yesterday, Sirius XM. Everything has been Kyler Murray this, Kyler Murray that. He's the most pivotal piece to the whole thing. He's the most captivating player in the draft. And he's just the guy that everybody wants to know about. And to be honest, I don't understand why Arizona is going to do this. I don't understand it, because it can be the best move Cliff Kingsbury does, or it's going to be the worst move that he does because of how Quinnen Williams and Nick Bosa turn out. But, of course, time will tell. So I agree. Arizona, Kyler Murray. Second overall, it has to be Nick Bosa, I think, for San Francisco, simply because there's so much need there off the edge for them. And you have now, you could play D Ford, Nick Bosa. That's a great pairing. And basically, when D Ford's ready to be done with his contract, you can pay Nick Bosa. So it'll work out well for them. And, of course, that's if Bosa's still producing and is healthy and everything else. But then 3 with the Jets, it does get interesting. I think Quinnen Williams should be the pick, but again, I think Ed Oliver is going to be the pick. I agree with you, just his versatility, and that puts Quinnen Williams in the spot at 4. Mike Mayock's going to talk John Gruden into taking him. He's too good to pass up, and Mayock's a smart guy, I think. So I think Quinnen would be the pick at 4, and then yes, Devin White at 5. That seems to be the thing since the combine. So I think that's just how it's going to go, and I think we're pretty much in agreement on the top 5. And obviously we could sit here and do 6 through 32. I think it'll get really interesting. But we are running a little short on time for tonight. But hopefully we can jump in tomorrow and do this one more time and get everything ironed out one last time before the 2019 NFL Draft. So, CP, again, thank you, my man, for joining me kind of on short notice for a Tuesday night. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. And I think we hit a lot of good stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll get to the Daniel Jones talk tomorrow night. How about that?
Okay, I'm down with that. I think we can definitely do that. So if we don't do the show, though, of course, you guys can follow us on Twitter @_ChristianPage, @RussNFLDraft. Smash those follow buttons. And, of course, check out cover1.net for all of our content. Download the Cover One app through your App Store, Google Play. And please make sure, with all the episodes that we've been dropping the last week or two, please subscribe, rate, review this podcast on Spotify, on Spreaker.com, and on iTunes. But until next time, this is Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast.